Leave your ego at the door and get ready to be raw. This is Strength to Overcome, where real men find their strength in weakness. All right, guys, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I'm Ryan here with my co-host Matt. This is episode 30 we're coming at you with, and we're excited to be back with you. And Matt, I'm excited to be with you, brother.
Always, mate. I did forget it was episode 30, although I've thought about it during the week and kind of found myself over the last couple of weeks running into a lot of members at the gym, having conversations and just being exposed to so many more people now after sitting on my bum for a few months there after the surgery. And as I'm having these conversations, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, man, I've got a great episode for you. You should check this one out. Oh, man, I really think this one would help you with what you're gonna sharing with me there. This one might be a good listen. You might be able to grab a nugget out of this guest episode, stuff like that. And it's been quite fascinating that we've covered a lot of topics. So I really appreciate you being vulnerable and opening this journey with me. And we were just talking off air a little bit about some of the stuff we've been going through, and kind of wanted to say, right, let's pause there and let's get that on tape, because it sounds to me like we're both kind of going through a little bit of a sticky point. And I've always wanted to be vulnerable on this show. I've wanted to be authentic. I've wanted to sort of share what's really going on, but we've also got spouses involved. And I think that there's been some content that I definitely would have loved to have shared, but maybe it's not the right time. Maybe there's never the right time on that. Maybe some things are meant to stay behind those closed doors, but also want to be authentic and vulnerable in the journey and just share about the challenges that I've had over the last week or so with regards to trying to understand as a husband how to lead my home, how to be a great husband, how to be a great dad, how to be a great trainer to my clients, how to be a great friend to someone like you. And right before you hit record, we were just talking about some of those challenges. So bring me up to speed on your week, and then it'll probably fire us off into what we were just talking about.
Yeah, it's been a pretty decent week. Erica came off of nights, and so she's got a little bit more of a normal schedule, kind of that 8 to 5, 8 to 4 type of schedule. So things have eased up a little bit at home, where I can have, Callan during the day, and, she'll get him up in the morning, but then I'll feed him, and she'll head off to work, and I'll have him through the afternoon, and then she gets home kind of that late afternoon time frame. And so it hasn't been quite as strenuous this last week, and it seems like things will ease up a little bit more as we go along after that tough stretch of her working, those big 12, 13-hour shifts. So that's been good at home. And, just trying to ease into the flow of the schedule, being the primary caretaker, if you will, the stay-at-home dad, the one who's with him during the days and that sort of thing. That's going to be the theme of my next, 3, 4, 5 years, really, right? Until he goes off to school for the first time. So just kind of getting into that flow.
And how are you holding up with that? I know that a couple of weeks ago, or episode 28 if it was, I challenged you during your birthday week celebration to put together some goals and have something outside of what you've just described as your week. Have you been able to do that, or how's that gone?
No, it's really been kind of flatlined. It's haven't really been able to zero in on, what I want outside of that, and, who Ryan really is, and that sort of thing. So that, in my post-golf life, post-fitness life, which is really where we are, it's like, what's next for Ryan? And I really haven't figured that out.
I think that we've had so many guests on and so many books we've read and topics we've talked about. As I've always said, you and my wife have a similar upbringing in that you were raised in broken homes by your mums, and there's been quite a lot of similarities that we've talked about on the show and off the show. Is there something there that I'm missing, or an expert might be able to dig in on, where there's that similarity, or is it just a coincidence? Because I do see a lot of that same lethargy, and Heather's been to the top in her career, and now that kids have come along, there's this different attitude of what does the top look like, who am I, finding my own identity again, but being really good at what I am doing. Am I zeroing in on something that happens from that broken home mentality where it's just a mum and not that father figure involved? Or are men generally more driven? And so if you didn't have that driving force in your home raising you, maybe there's not there, but you've both had super successful careers, but at this point now that kids come along, it's almost like that's replaced it, but it's not enough. Am I tracking on something there, or am I reaching?
Yeah, I think there's something in there, it's, people like me and probably like her are high achievers, right? And so we get some of our self-worth and value from positions and achieving things and milestones and things like that. And so, at relatively young ages, we both achieved quite a bit and put ourselves in a lot of great positions. And, not that we're not in good positions now, but it's kind of beyond that. We're no longer achieving things on paper, and it's more of the immaterial things that matter, which, as we know, that's kind of life in general, right? Is that it's not the material things, it's the emotions, it's the moments, the memories, the things that are really going to last. And I think that's where I struggle quite a bit. Maybe that's where she's struggled too. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, and of course, we've always tried to not speak of other people not on the show, but we're obviously doing this podcast. We're two guys, we've got wives, we've got kids, and we're trying to figure it out. And we've always tried to maintain a positive outlook and really G each other up and have great guests on the show. But I've found myself over the last couple of weeks here trying to understand how to be a better husband and what does that look like to someone that's still trying to figure that out and doing the dance versus pulling a trigger on a determined target. And you've always had a lot of similarities there where I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I help that person navigate that process? So what I was looking for would be insight from your perspective as the spouse in your marriage that is going through something similar, almost as if to give me a cheat code or encouragement, or maybe even some correction, which I'm definitely open to if I'm off target here. But, our goal is to always be better at the situations we find ourselves in. And I feel like I've been lacking in the wisdom, even though I've poured into so much material and so much content, watching, reading, listening, talking to experts. I feel like I'm not equipped to help someone that doesn't have a North Star, doesn't have a goal. So what would you say to me in this case where I said 2 weeks ago, hey man, I'm going to hit you in a couple of weeks after that episode of making sure you've got some goals, but there aren't any. Now, of course, you're not my spouse. I don't have to worry about nagging at you, but I would say, where does that void fit in? Is that disinterest? Is it I just don't know? Is it oh, I've got too many? Or is it hey, I feel like what I'm doing is my goal, but I don't know how to pin it as that?
Yeah, it's tough. I think for me, it's just the trying to stay above water every day is emotionally above water, not physically necessarily, but, tackling each day and kind of getting lost in the minutia of day in and day out. Hey, I've got to do this. I got another 30 minutes and then I've got to feed the baby. And then, I've got to play with them here. And then I've got to do this and this and this. And oh, let me take a shower. And, every day it goes by and it's like, the big picture doesn't even get looked at. It's just getting lost in the day to day. And sometimes that can be nice, getting lost in the process. But like you mentioned, if you don't really have a North Star or something that's guiding and directing you, it can feel kind of fruitless at times. And that's where, I tend to get frustrated with myself quite a bit is just not really having a direction to point to that's outside of my day to day, minute to minute life.
And how does your spouse, again, try not to speak for her, but how does that create a dynamic in your house that works from someone that's obviously going up the, top of that food chain and becoming a doctor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could say it works well because it kind of balances each other out where I'm not expected to be the breadwinner or expected to have a big career at this point. I've kind of done done my share and, helped us get through the medical school and, really supported us for a decent number of years there. And now my role has kind of gone toward taking care of the baby during the day. So in a way, you could say it works out well. On the other side, it could be frustrating because she has to see me day in and day out, not very happy and not very satisfied. And that can be challenging for a spouse to feel like they're having to drag someone along with them that doesn't really have a direction, doesn't have any goals or aspirations anymore.
Is there any kind of resentment or bitterness that you carry into each and every day, watching her chase something that is going to happen? And that's obviously something you've done in the past as a golf pro and as a gym owner, multiple gym owner, where you've had to really zero in on that target to achieve it. And now you're watching her do that, but yours feels fruitless. I'm not saying it is, but you've mentioned it feels fruitless. It's not. I'm going to tell you that straight up. What you're doing is the hardest job in the world, but you feel like it's a bit of monotony creeping in on you already after 4 months.
Yeah.
Is that a tough dynamic to handle in the house?
A little bit. It's just because, we even joked about it like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could switch places and she could stay home and take care of Callan and I could go to work and pretend to be a doctor and, just see how long how long I could fool people into thinking that I was the doctor there. But, yeah, it's a little bit tough just because I don't get to go help people, talk to people, be around people, and that's kind of her fulfillment right now is what she gets from that. But it's one of those deals where it's like the grass is always greener on the other side type of thing because she spends all day wanting to be at home with the baby, and I spend all day with the baby thinking, oh man, wouldn't it be nice to get out and talk to someone or help someone with their fitness or, that sort of thing. So it's definitely a juxtaposition of sorts.
Yeah, I'm really in the back of my mind trying to put away these nuggets as we stay live on air, but I think over the course of my last handful of years where I stepped away from training and tried to provide through a different outlet, which was successful for a period of time and then fell apart. I've definitely not been the perfect example of a providing husband during that time, although I did quickly turn that into a successful, re-entry into the carpentry space for a number of years there too. So it hasn't all been, down and out, but it's definitely led us to a place where I think there's maybe some respect fallen away for me as a provider of a home with two kids and being able to, pull those things together. And of course, then you have a surgery out of pocket. You have 6 months of not being able to work at the two careers that I've been very successful at and tried to get work in other areas and just nothing stuck. So I think I've probably got this Dupree. You remember that movie, You Mean Dupree?
Hmm.
Tag on me at the moment of a bit of a bum that's, down and out. But for those of the audience that know me as a successful gym owner and as a, 30-year carpenter and always trying to exceed and excel at what I've done. Now I'm back in the gym business and building up a good bunch of clients, as you mentioned the other day, right? Getting my annual income, boosted back up to a respectable tally. And, maybe that will shift the focus, but it can't be a transactional effort on my part, which I know you've mentioned. I have to be careful that I'm not trying to do something to win love or affection, intimacy, those types of things. I'm actually got to reset my own North Star to what's the best version of Matt that I could be. And that's where I've really been wrestling recently, just making sure that the things that I say, the things that I do, the bar that I set is not for anything. It's not to get anything. It's because I know I'm capable of it and I should just go and do it and help as many people as I can along the path. So you've already kind of said a few things there that, stick. And definitely some things that I can work on with regards to looking at the journey that I'm on. And that doesn't necessarily mean things turn around for me in that space, but it does mean that I continue to become the best version of myself, irrespective of whether I receive something for my efforts.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you been able to give her the praise, acknowledgement, support that what she's doing would warrant? Or is that tough for you because you've been there, or is it tough because that's not in your nature?
Yeah, it's a little tough for me. Yeah, definitely the communication side of things and words of affirmation, praise don't come easily to me. And, you know, kind of being shut down in a way that I am, it's definitely a tough thing for me to call that out. And, I'm one of those people that, I don't use a lot of praising words, and I can write a really nice card, right? I can write a nice note, but a lot of times my actions and even my spoken words don't seem to match what's on the written card. So that's always a work in progress for me, and it's definitely been a challenge for me throughout my life, really.
Have you, during your course of trying to find the right balance of medication and the alcoholism that you battled through and still working through there, but ever gone to a specialist or had any kind of testing done to see where that comes from, or if it can be something that's worked through or managed?
Yeah, I never really, I've gone to some counseling, and I'm currently, seeing a counselor, which I think a lot of people should be doing just, in general, but, cause it's a healthy thing. But, the theme keeps coming up, and it seems to have come up in the past, and it's back up now of like, Ryan, you seem to exhibit some traits of someone who might be on the spectrum a little bit. And, that whole theory of spectrum and autism and all that has kind of evolved over the years to where everybody's on some form of the spectrum, one way or another. But yeah, I've recently kind of been diving into some things of like, and we've documented this on the show of like, mental health battles and, depression and the alcohol thing. And I've just lived a generally frustrating experience since I was a little kid. I was very frustrated and angry as a kid all the way through my adulthood. And, the question has always come up like, why? Why am I that way? What's wrong in my world? Because on paper, things aren't very wrong. They're actually quite great. But emotionally, it's a different story. And so the idea has been posed of Asperger's, which is an interesting, we won't call it a diagnosis because, like I said, I haven't really seen a specialist to diagnose, but I have taken a test that I scored pretty high on the extensive test of kind of an atypical, neuroatypical would score. And it's interesting because I think that's what's a lot of that frustration and lack of communication and misunderstanding and, the affection piece of not being able to necessarily give the right type of affection at the right times, at the right moments. I think a lot of that could be just because there's a little bit of a spectrum issue going on there that we really haven't worked through. And, it basically means my brain works differently than other people's brains. So it's just something I'm starting to learn about, and, not really claiming to be an expert or that it's even the full picture, but, it's definitely a piece of the puzzle, right?
So walk me through a little bit. I'm sure that when you've taken that test and you felt like you scored highly on it, have you had anyone around you, friend? I mean, I know this is the first time we're talking about it, so I haven't even done that test, but is there anyone around you that you've been able to kind of compare it to? Friends, family, mum, dad, anyone that you can sort of say, well, what did you get on it? Is everyone testing high on this thing because they want to, you know, prescribe something, or is it no, no, no? This is just as I score highly on it, and now it's like a new window of opportunity to learn about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, after I took it, I shared it with Erica, and she took the same test just to kind of be a control against my score, and she scored extremely low, meaning she was more neurotypical. And so, and the questions were pretty clear. Even reading through the questions, it was things like, Are you socially isolated? Do you like to do things a certain way? Do you have to have a routine? Do you, get upset when things don't go a certain way? Do you, things like that. And it's like the boxes were just checking in my head, like, okay, check, check, check. That's kind of what I've struggled with, throughout my years. And it's just like I said, my brain, if that is the case, my brain just doesn't work the same way that someone else's does. And so I have to figure out a way, around that or through that, really, not around it, but through it, and be able to, find some joy, find some happiness, find some direction, even though I've got, this idea of the spectrum thing going on. It's just something to work through.
Do you think now that you've gone through some of those questions and you've said, yep, check, yep, check, yep, check, and you look back at your career paths, do you find or do you see how those checked boxes would have made you a good golfer or a good business owner?
Yeah, I mean, I get obsessed you know, with anything that comes my way that piques my interest, right? It's whether it's basketball as a kid, then turned into golf, then turned into schoolwork and getting good grades, and, then turned into the career in the golf industry, the owning multiple gyms, the fitness, the competitions, I tracked every macro that I put in my body for 3 or 4 years straight. I was, just dialed in on every aspect of things because my brain just zeroes in on, a certain thing and just, I get obsessed with it. And that's pretty typical of this kind of a thing with people like me.
So what would be the next step for you? Would you reach out to someone and try and get a more, conclusive series of questions that might help you understand it a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. I think that'd be a good next step, and just kind of learning more about what makes me tick, and, some of my triggers, um, is important because I can, learn more about, how this is why this is happening. This is why I feel this way. This is why I'm reacting a certain way. And, that's, like you said, it's all part of building the puzzle and kind of putting the puzzle pieces together, even though we're 39 years in and it's like, all right, now we're just starting to get somewhere. Let's keep on it and let's figure this thing out.
Does that in itself excite you and could turn into something you put your focus on? Not that, like you said earlier, there's nothing wrong. It's just who you are and how your brain works. But is there a driving force within you that's like, wow, okay, this helps me understand me so that I can be better husband, better dad, better friend, better blah, 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 right?
Yeah, that's hopefully the end goal, because I've spent most of my life, wondering, frankly, what's wrong, what's wrong with me? What's the deal here? I just, yeah, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger and frustration at myself and out, then that projects out into the world as a certain character. And, I've become like the villain of my own story in a way versus the hero. And, this realization can hopefully work to turn things around a little bit, I would say, in terms of like, all right, here's what's going on. Here's where we are. This is why this happens. This is why that happens. Let's put in some work and let's continue to figure this thing out, and, you know, let's make some progress.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you said you become the victim or the what did you say, the villain, I think.
Villain,
Yeah,
yeah.
of the story, not the hero. That was an interesting thought. We never sometimes get a chance while we're live here to really process, and I always go away thinking about stuff, and that'll kind of sit with me, that little thought there. But are you excited to do a test that kind of shows you, whoa, like didn't know that? Again, not good or bad, just data.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kind of shines a light on the darkness in a way, right? There's a lot of darkness in my world and has been for a long time. And so, shining a flashlight on it and then saying, all right, here's what's going on, or here's part of the puzzle, what's going on. And let's start to work off of that and start to rebuild this thing, not necessarily physically like we're talking about, but rebuild emotionally, from years and years and years of frustration. Like here's a path forward.
Is the information that you gathered, again, it's not a diagnosis, so we don't want to get down to that path, but the information that you've been shown, does it help you to think, wow, maybe I don't need to be on the stuff that I'm on to manage it, which numbs me? Because I know that there have been times you've been high, but you've also had times you've been low. And I know that you have shared in the past some of that stuff helps level you out. But what if that stuff that's leveling you out is masking something you could work on to be even, more spectacular in some direction?
Yeah, it's tough because it's hard to do an experiment on yourself, with coming off and going on different medications and, you know, dealing with the withdrawal of stopping medication and that sort of thing. But, and I've tried it in the past. I've come off everything in the past, and it hasn't been a good version of myself for sure. But, the end goal would be to kind of work toward an emotional state and some regulation where, yeah, we can look at dropping a medication or so and not have disastrous effects.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a cheat code within your own game that you're playing where you've come across this room on a screen and it's like, oh, wait a minute. If I get that antidote of knowledge, I might be able to drop off something that's causing me to be a bit flatlined or, lethargic in this, sprint towards, well, feeling important and valued and loved, which hopefully you are, but sometimes we need a little bit more information. So I'm kind of almost excited for you as you go through this process, and you have to shoot me that test. Not because I feel the same way, of course I don't, but it's fascinating when you start to read information, which I do a lot. We are reading material that does kind of expose where we're at or how we're feeling, and it does shine a light on ourselves. And I think sometimes when, as trainers, we get new information or a new exercise, we want to use it with someone. Oh, this is really good. This is where it felt good for me. And then, you get them to do it, and they're like, I don't feel in the same spot, and, over the course of 20 years, I think I've experienced that. I think most trainers probably have. But in this case, I'm excited for you because you might have found something that'll help give you some information that might help you get out of that state of ho-hum. And,
Mm.
I've known you a long time, but I've missed a decade in the middle or so. But when I was training you back in the day, I, would have some enormous joy with you while we were playing the game and working out at times together or whatever it looked like, that I would feel really sad for you if you don't have that in your life at all anymore. And I know you sent me a photo the other day. Oh, you can clip this out if you want to. Sent me a photo of Callum the other day, and he was just beaming from one ear to the next. And your caption under the photo said, "Doesn't look anything like me." And I'm like, man, there was a time where you and I had some really good times and some laughs, and we had a lot of fun playing the game and cutting up on each other and enjoying, right? You were great at what you did in the golf world. I was good at what I was doing in my fitness journey, and we were able to kind of rag on each other a little bit to just motivate, push each other. And I always remember having a lot of fun with you and some really good times. And it saddens me to see that every now and then, there's definitely some energy that's dropped off in you. And, my hope and prayer is that you'll come across the right information through this podcast, through a guest, through this test, through everything, right? Information that's delivered from divine appointments, which we've talked about, that would help you become more of the original designed Ryan Robertson that was designed to exist.
Mm.
And I've seen you in glimpses, and that's why I think we've got this connection there, because I do remember those better times, which maybe some other people don't know. People that don't know you now listening to this going, right, we're 30 episodes in. Who is this Ryan Robinson that you talk about? Who is this character that used to be able to enjoy life on a different level and now is maybe stuck in a bit of a rut? How does he get out of it? Did he get himself there? Or is it just the world has kind of fed him this lie that what he's going through, that, well, that's it, that's too bad, so sad, when in all reality, I believe that, an almighty creator can come along and give you information or lead you to the right person or a right guest or the right book, or maybe it's an accumulation of all those things that help you break out of that cage of feeling like you're in the darkness and becoming this light to many others that feel the same way. So I'm kind of excited for you, man. I'm going to keep praying for you that things like that happen. Of course, I'm going to keep praying for myself as well. Not like I'm the preacher here and you're the audience, but I'm excited about this new journey that you hopefully will find brings you some light to that path that sadly has been darkened for a long time, man. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it'll, you know, like I said, I don't kid myself, and I know I've got a pretty good life, and I've got a lot of things going well for me, and on paper things look really good. But really, my main goal is emotionally, if I can turn the corner and get some of that joy back, like you're talking about, I think that would be the ultimate for me as we move into the fourth decade of my life here, as we get into the 40s here soon, and it's time to take a step back and enjoy things for once.
Well, I'm motivated by that, brother. I
Yeah, man.
can tell sometimes when your texts are not quite as filled with joy as others. And I think we all do that, right? We all hold an emoticon back if we want to convey sadness, disappointment, loneliness, rejection, dissatisfaction with something, right? We all do that. And then other times we pump it full of emoticons and the other side of that, seeing a different side of us. And I don't think we should always be rainbows and butterflies, but it is nice to see that there's something inside of you that says, you know what, there's a version of me that can live more often than the version you're currently experiencing. So I'll be really praying that the right people and right material gets put in front of you. And, I've watched thing after thing after thing unfold before me through this podcast. 30 episodes in, just stagger me to prove that there is a divine power putting these things together. And this podcast is, if nothing else, it's for us. And
Yeah.
I'm excited that we've got this one time a week check in, and hopefully some more great content coming from another guest soon. And you always seem to find a way to inspire me, even if you do feel like you're in the darkness. You pick me up. So thanks for that, as always, brother. Appreciate you on the backside of things, and obviously when we go live too, it's important. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right, guys, that's that for this week. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's get the word out there, and let's help each other grow.
Appreciate it, guys. Stay strong.
See ya.